Welcome back to my channel, my friends. Tonight we delve back into the haunting world of the paranormal. We've got 3 new stories that are sure to send chills down your spine. So turn down the lights, turn up the volume, and get ready. Old courthouses, places of law, justice, and sometimes unspeakable horrors. These buildings have stood for centuries, silent witnesses to humanity's triumphs and failures. But within their aging walls, whispers of anguish and terror echo through time, carried by the spirits of those who found no peace in life. Tonight we explore 3 such tales of ghostly figures spotted in these halls of justice. These are not just stories, my friends, but glimpses into the spectral realm where the living and the dead sometimes collide. Are you brave enough to face the unknown? Our first story takes us to a small, forgotten town in the Midwest, a town much like any other where time seems to move a little slower. The Courthouse, a Gothic structure of stone and iron, looms over the town square, a monument to a bygone era. It's been abandoned for decades, left to decay and crumble. Its once grand halls now home to only shadows and dust. But locals will tell you that some things refuse to rest. The old caretaker, a man named William, knew the building like the back of his hand. He had been there for years, tending to its upkeep, keeping the ghosts at bay. Or so he thought. One night, as William made his rounds, a bone-chilling cold settled over the building. The air grew heavy, making it difficult to breathe. He could feel his heart pounding in his chest. He paused, listening intently. The only sound was the creaking of the building settling around him, and then he heard it. A faint rhythmic tapping echoing from the courtroom above. It sounded like footsteps, slow and deliberate. William cautiously made his way up the creaking stairs, each step sending shivers down his spine. He felt a presence, unseen but palpable, watching him, toying with him. As he reached the courtroom door, he peered through the dusty glass. The room was dimly lit by the moon shining through the grimy windows, casting long, eerie shadows across the worn wooden benches and the judge's empty chair. But there, at the defense table, sat a figure shrouded in shadow. The figure was tall and imposing, its form obscured by what looked like a long, flowing robe. The robe seemed to absorb the moonlight, leaving only the impression of a void where its face should have been. The tapping grew louder, more insistent. William's blood ran cold. He watched in terror as the figure slowly rose from its seat, the robe flowing around it like liquid darkness. It turned towards William, and he could feel its gaze, cold and penetrating, piercing through the glass, through his very soul. William stumbled back from the door, his heart threatening to burst out of his chest. He had heard the stories, the whispers of a judge who had met an untimely end, his spirit forever bound to the courtroom where he had presided. But he never dared to believe them. Until now. He fled the courthouse that night, never to return. Some say the phantom judge still roams the halls of the abandoned courthouse, a spectral arbiter dispensing his own silent brand of justice. And the rhythmic tapping, some say it's the ghost of the judge's gavel, a chilling reminder that even in death some debts remain unpaid. Our next story takes us to the bustling metropolis of Chicago, to a courthouse known for its stunning architecture and its even more stunning tales of the supernatural. It's a place where the weight of countless verdicts seems to seep into the very walls, a palpable energy that some say fuels paranormal activity. Late one evening, a young lawyer named Sarah found herself working long after the last of her colleagues had gone home. The case she was working on, a particularly complex and emotionally draining one, had consumed her. She was determined to find the evidence she needed to save her client. As the city outside slumbered, Sarah sat alone in her dimly lit office, surrounded by stacks of legal documents. She felt a chill run down her spine, but she dismissed it as a draft from the old windows. Lost in her work, she didn't notice the subtle changes in the atmosphere. A low, mournful sob, barely audible at first, reached her ears. She paused, listening intently, her heart pounding in her chest. The sound seemed to be coming from the hallway outside her office. She cautiously stepped out into the hallway, her footsteps echoing eerily in the silence. The air was heavy with a cloying perfume, like old roses and decaying wood. As she walked down the hallway, the sobbing grew louder, more distinct. It was the unmistakable sound of a woman weeping, filled with an unbearable sorrow that sent shivers down Sarah's spine. She rounded a corner and stopped dead in her tracks. Standing at the end of the hallway, bathed in the pale moonlight streaming through a tall window, was a figure that made Sarah's blood run cold. It was a woman dressed in a long black dress that seemed to belong to another era. Her face was hidden by a veil, but Sarah could see the glint of tears on her pale cheeks. The woman turned her head slightly, and Sarah could sense her gaze, cold and piercing, fixed upon her. She felt a wave of sadness wash over her, so intense it was almost unbearable. It was as if the woman's grief was a living, breathing entity seeping into Sarah's very being. Sarah stood frozen in place, unable to move or speak, as the weeping woman glided silently towards her. The air grew colder, and the scent of roses and decay intensified, threatening to suffocate Sarah. She wanted to scream, to run, but she was paralyzed with fear. As the figure drew closer, Sarah noticed something peculiar about her hands. They were long and slender, but her fingers were unnaturally long, tipped with what looked like razor-sharp claws. The woman reached out a hand towards Sarah, her touch light as a feather, and then, as quickly as she had appeared, the figure vanished. The hallway was silent again, the only sound the pounding of Sarah's heart. Our final story takes us to the sun-drenched state of California, to a courthouse steeped in history and rumored to be one of the most haunted locations in the state. It's a place where the line between the living and the dead seems to blur, where whispers of the past mingle with the sounds of the present. A group of paranormal investigators, armed with cameras and EMF readers, decided to spend the night in the old courthouse, hoping to capture evidence of the spirits said to roam its halls. They were a seasoned team, used to dealing with the unknown, but nothing could have prepared them for what they encountered that night. They set up their equipment in the main courtroom, a grand space with towering ceilings and an air of faded grandeur. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation, a palpable sense of something unseen watching their every move. As the night wore on, the investigators began to experience a series of unsettling events. Cameras malfunctioned, batteries drained inexplicably, and strange disembodied voices whispered through their EVP recordings. The temperature fluctuated wildly, sending chills down their spines. Then, just when they were about to call it a night, one of the investigators noticed something peculiar on the camera feed. There, at the back of the courtroom, stood a tall, shadowy figure. It was difficult to make out in the dim light, but it appeared to be wearing a long coat and what looked like a hat. The investigators were excited. This was the evidence they had been waiting for. They cautiously approached the figure, their cameras rolling, their hearts pounding with a mixture of fear and adrenaline. As they drew closer, the figure turned towards them, and the investigators gasped in horror. The figure had no head. Where its head should have been, there was only a void, an emptiness that seemed to suck the light out of the room. The investigators froze, their blood running cold. They had heard the stories, the legends of a headless bailiff who roamed the halls of the courthouse, seeking revenge for his untimely demise. But they never thought they would come face to face with it. The headless figure took a step towards them, its boots echoing ominously on the marble floor. The investigators panicked. They scrambled back, dropping their equipment, their terror growing with each step the figure took towards them. They fled the courtroom, the sound of their own screams echoing through the empty halls of the courthouse. They ran until they could run no more, collapsing in a heap outside, gasping for breath, their eyes wide with terror. They never returned to the courthouse, forever haunted by the memory of the headless bailiff. Thank you for joining me tonight, my friends, as we explored the chilling tales of ghostly figures spotted in old courthouses. Remember, these are more than just stories. They're glimpses into the unsettling reality that sometimes the past refuses to stay buried. If you enjoyed tonight's journey into the shadows, be sure to give this video a thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel for more spine-chilling content, and hit that notification bell so you never miss a new upload. And until next time, my friends, sweet dreams, or as sweet as they can be after hearing these tales.